In all these years, we emphasize two words: wealth and jobs. And we try to waken our people up to show them where wealth and jobs come from.
The Parish Development Model, PDM, is a bold initiative that is reshaping Uganda's rural economy. By allocating 100 million shillings to each parish annually, PDM empowers households by unlocking opportunities for wealth creation.
This program will be maintained. Each year we send 100 million for the parish. If you get the 1 million, you can buy some goats, you can buy some pigs, you can buy even young cows.
Farmers are transitioning from subsistence farming to commercial agriculture, laying the groundwork for wealth creation and improved livelihoods.
This project started 11 years ago after an inspiration from His Excellency. And that time I was working as a taxi driver. I was doing that Massa business in Soroti, and he was talking about how to improve household income. With
the PDM, you bring back the money after 24 months, but in the third year, you would get another 100 million paid back by those who got first.
The President's message is a mindset changer. Becoming rich does not mean you should have a lot of land, you should have a lot of education, you just need a vision and implement and start from where you are.
So therefore, this PDM is to get all of you out of poverty. That's why we said 100 million per parish per year.
This message is brought to you by the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance.
In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of information, defenders of truth. With Mascari Heritage Advantage, they uphold every citizen's right to reliable and free information. Their archived stories shaped our past and illuminate our present. Yet now, as new challenges arise and the world evolves, their mission faces its greatest test yet. Be part of our journey and let's navigate the unknown, uncover the untold, and safeguard our future together. Tune into your public broadcaster, for it is the intersection of trust and truth. Because to UBC, your story, and every voice matters. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Sorry for that technical glitch. Welcome to the Extra. I'm Robert Chirabo Nyonyintono. I know it's raining in at least the 5 divisions of Kampala, but good you're with us as we bring you the Extra, where I usually have a guest or guests with me in studios. And this morning I'm going to be looking at the 28th annual report on the state of human rights and freedoms in Uganda 2025 that was released yesterday. But I'm not alone to discuss this. I have a legal perspective of it, and join me welcome my guest, Counsel Simon Senyonga, who is the Director, International Center for Religious Advocacy and Development. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Robert. It's my pleasure to be here and to join you. It's my maiden appearance on your morning show, specifically you hosting me. Glad having you. I usually know you from the other side of things. I don't know if you're still there. That is the preaching and ministry. But now here we have just noted that you're the Director, International Center for Religious Advocacy and Development. Yes. Now, what does this do? So, the International Center for Religious Advocacy and Development is an institution that is the freedom of worship. So we realized that within the conversation of the human rights order in Uganda, but also globally and regionally, there hadn't been emphasis on that specific freedom of worship. So you know that, for example, under chapter 20 or under chapter 4 of the Constitution, we have a mandate under Article 29 to see the full realization of religious liberties and the freedom of worship. So that was not really a forefront conversation in the Ugandan context, but also as a developing conversation at the regional and global level. So our institution focuses on the enhancement of that right, the development of that right, but also the advocacy of that specific right. So to broaden the context and the picture. So you know that most people think that the freedom of worship is, oh, I can go to church. Yet it is actually more than that. It has both the intrinsic perspective but also the expressive perspective. So what we are laboring to do is to get as many people to appreciate government institutions, entities, security agencies, non-state actors, to appreciate the necessity of the realization and the growth of the freedom of worship as a fundamental human right. And recently I saw someone talking about people who preach on the streets making noise. We are going to have noise limitations, this, that. And of course some were a bit saying, don't attack. You're going to a not red zone. Yes. Religion, culture, you don't say anything about those two. But I think also it's because the nature of that conversation is rather emotive because of the value people attach to it. So you know that the recent National Population Census report by UBOS indicated that 87% of the Ugandans ascribe to a faith or religion. Now that's a significant demographic in terms of the Ugandan context. So it shows you why this freedom of worship is very important. But you see, the freedom of worship does not exist on its own. When you're looking at human rights, you talk about the principle of intersectionality, that human rights don't stand alone. If you look at, for example, what Article 20 of the Constitution talks about, the protection of the fundamental freedoms, Article 21, the non-discrimination, you get to Article 23 up to Article 29, where now you see the realization of this right. So when you're talking about the freedom of worship, for example, you're talking about the freedom of association, because you can't enjoy that right without associating. You can't enjoy that right without expressing yourself. You can't enjoy that right without accessing information. You can't enjoy that right without your protection under the different international treaties, Article 45 of the Constitution and the national objectives of directive principles and state policy. So definitely the conversation on the freedom of worship is fundamental in the context of intersectionality and in the context of its full realization at an international, global level through the treaty obligations that we have as a nation. Yes. Now that said, still before we leave issues regarding rights of freedom, recently His Excellency advised
and said, let's postpone. In a statement, of course, his advice is a directive.
Yes.
That we will not have June as Mother's Day celebration.
Yes.
To put it simply, tegenda kubaayo kulamagana mugongo nga 3 June. Olw'endwadde y'Ebola eyabalukawo ku mulirwano. So we will not have 3rd June as Mother's Day. However, he said, it was postponed to another date that will be communicated, given how things move. Now I want you to speak to that faithful who feels maybe this didn't go well, who feels it is their right, who feels it's the Lord that protects us.
Now, first of all, the Constitution guarantees or protects the freedom of worship. However, in a legal context, people must appreciate that the freedom of worship is not an absolute right. Absolute right in the context that it can be given limitations. There are some rights which cannot be touched, no matter the situation. But then there are rights which can be put to limitation. Now, Article 43 of the Constitution says the fundamental human rights can be limited in the context of about 2 or 3 aspects. Number 1, for the purposes of public order. That's why, for example, you have the Public Order and Management Act for the sake of order. Then for the sake of public morals, you've heard of the Anti-Homosexuality Act, the Anti-Pornographic Act, for the protection of morals. Then the 3rd aspect is for the protection of public health. Now the government of Uganda has a legal mandate to protect the health, to protect the society. Now one of the things it can do is that under Article 43, it can limit that fundamental human right. Now, for example, in the context where you have such a public event like what happens on 3rd June, the Mother's Day, it attracts millions of people. Sometimes we only focus on what happens in Namugongo. But you know Namugongo has both the Anglican and the Catholic shrine. But also you think about the pilgrimage, the pilgrims who move from all over the country. And some of those are, for example, coming from some of what have been the affected areas. So in order to manage the public health, I saw the statement released by Permanent Secretary Mrs. Atwine, clearly stating that actually I liked the language that was used. They said, look here, there are those considerations that people who draw big numbers, for example religious institutions or concerts or areas which gather a lot of people, should consider. Then also they put the mandatory aspects. For example, having sanitization facilities, being able to manage the numbers in a responsible way. So to the faithful out there, it is to appreciate that the current health situation, the government has taken precautionary measures, and definitely rightly so within the context of the law, to make sure that it preserves the broader public, which is under their legal mandate. Because at the end of the day, if we lost any lives, the government, the cost will be higher on the government, but also us as the people. So the president, I perceive, has acted in very good will, not only to suspend the celebration on that day, 3rd June, definitely with the condition of as they are monitoring the situation, but then subsequently they are also saying they are going to have the celebrations on a later date. So I feel that the celebrant out there, all of us who are concerned about the Mother's Day, it is important that we observe the government order, the government regulations, the government guidance, because I believe they have our best will at their heart.
Now this takes me to the report that was launched yesterday by the Uganda Human Rights Commission, indicating, detailing the state of human rights and freedoms. You were there, you are a lawyer, of course it had some issues regarding the elections we've just concluded, but in summary, what were your outstanding concerns as a legal practitioner?
I think, first of all, the context of the report was limited to the thematic area of electoral justice. So the period you have just come in, from 2025 ahead of the early 2026, the focus on electoral democracy. The key highlights, number 1, included about, the report has about 13 chapters, and specifically it focused on the areas of personal liberties in the context of electoral democracy, the key human rights issues that were emerging during the electoral period. the people's right to register. I think one of the key statistics that came out was that in a population of over 48 million people, I think we had about 11 million people turning up to vote, yet about 22.3 people registered for elections, but 11 turned out. So the concerns were, what was the cause of that big discrepancy? Over 50%, about 50% of the population being able to show up to vote. Is it out of voter apathy? Is it out of lack of civic passion and participation in the elections? There were also issues around AI and human rights, because we know that right now we are in a digital era. So the concerns of AI, the responsible handling of AI, the ethical handling of AI, the replacement of human reasoning and passion and compassion in the context of AI. There were also issues of mental health that were raised. There were also other emerging issues around women's rights. The question of cancer and its emergence in the Ugandan context and how it affects the human rights. But for me, the most concerning or the most outstanding was Uganda's performance in terms of its international legal obligations. So as I earlier on told you, the Constitution of Uganda has a part before you get into the main chapters, which is called the National Objectives and Directive Principles of State Policy. That is what represents the heart or the mind of the Ugandan perspective concerning a realization of human rights. So it creates for the Uganda's foreign policy and how it must observe international legal obligations. And part of our foreign policy, for example, is number one, non-alignment, but also number two, acting in goodwill to protect our legal obligations. Part of our legal obligations is to protect, to realize, to promote the international human rights that are protected under those different treaties. So the report gave a lot of emphasis on how Uganda has been performing through a system called the Universal Periodic Review. Now that is a system whereby, for example, the different human rights are assessed and different players come into action to make sure that the conversation around the different human rights is realized. But also, you asked about some of my key concerns. Uganda, the government of Uganda is in the process of the development of the national budget. Part of the key documents that form, and many Ugandans don't know this, the key document that, for example, forms the budget in this, for example, under the NDP, which we are following right now, is the 10-point program, which is authored by the Ministry of Finance. Part of that conversation is the development of the human capital development,
which usually takes giants share in our budgets.
Yes, because when you look at where our government is going, that is a key realization. For example, the parish development model, the building of the human capital development. Now, that means when you're talking about the conversation of fundamental human rights, there is no way you're going to ignore civic participation, civic understanding of what human rights are, but even their full participation in the conversation. And I wanted to commend the Human Rights Commission, because part of the things that they did yesterday, which I don't think I've seen with very many public entities, is the authoring or the having of the public report, the public hearing, to come and participate in the launch of the report. That is a very commendable step. So Uganda Human Rights Commission has a mandate under Article 52 of the Constitution, under Article 51 and Article 52 up to about Article 54 of the Constitution, to do what are called periodic review reports. So this report was a periodic review of the electoral period. So it was raising those different concerns around the different human rights. So that was of keen interest to me as a practitioner, but also as a concerned citizen. Yeah.
Very interesting highlights there. Now, you're a legal practitioner, and most of the times when you talk about human rights, I want us also to look at the other side of responsibilities.
Yes.
The report had something to do with elections that have just been concluded.
Yes.
Where one would say, it is my right to speak. You know, why would you take me on? Also, you just challenge me through speech.
Yes.
if I'm seemingly having offended you, don't bring in arrests and what.
Yes.
Let's take it on.
Yeah.
Some freedom of expression.
Yes.
That, well, you can't block an entire road.
Yes.
Because you have a candidate.
Yeah.
Some will say, but it's my rights, freedom of expression, freedom of movement.
Yes.
Please chip in responsibilities and human rights.
Now, and what you raise, Mr. Chirabo, is actually a very important aspect of the report, because part of the concerns that were raised, there is a whole chapter dedicated to personal liberties under Article 23 of the Constitution. Now, we know that in the recent elections we just held, there was extensive limitation of personal liberties. You remember that there was the whole switch off of the internet, and you talked about the freedom of expression. So on one side, the government was saying, look here, we have a responsibility to curtail any potential violence that could spread at a macro level because of the internet, because of TikTok, because of, we had just had a precedent of Kenya, we had just had a precedent of Tanzania. So the government took precautionary measures in the switching off of the internet. But on the other side, the citizenry was saying, look here, we have a freedom to express ourselves, to express our views. Expressing of our views is just bigger than talking about what is happening in the country in the electoral period. But also, internet gives us an opportunity to be able to synergize, to be able to follow in real time what is happening. Because the electoral period is not just a common period. This is a period where people are coming out to express their full will and governance for the next 5 years. So if under Article 1 of the Constitution, power belongs to the people who will exercise it based on their sovereignty and based on their election, free and fair elections. The switching off of internet, most people argued, that is a limitation to actually our full participation in a free, fair election. The report also highlighted how the freedom of expression was again unfairly limited in a certain context under Article 43. Because if you're going to limit any fundamental human right, any limitation that you put must be directly proportionate to the danger. So the government is saying, look here, there has been people who are using internet to spread violence, to spread propaganda, to spread false information. But then we are putting a limitation for a certain period of time. So definitely that was in terms of the limitation. Now you talked about something very fundamental, which is the responsibility of the citizens. The first responsibility in an electoral democracy is to ensure that, number one, you register as a voter. Number two, you follow through on everything that is going to happen in the electoral period. For example, checking the register. Number two, participating in the campaigns, meaningfully engaging the members. Part of the other responsibilities you have as a citizen is even to stand and to run for electoral office. So definitely, as a citizen, you have a responsibility to that extent. But also, you have a responsibility to access information under Chapter 4 of the Constitution. So access to information gives you a higher advantage to meaningfully engage in the electoral process within the electoral democracy. So access to information is another aspect that is very important. But also holding your leaders accountable. So we know that the electoral cycle gives us an opportunity as Ugandans to participate in the election of our leaders from the local government level to the parliamentary level to the presidential level. So under Article 79 of the Constitution, we have a duty to follow up with how Parliament is going to run the responsibilities of representation, appropriation, among other aspects. So our responsibility as Ugandans is to be civically aware, but also to civically participate. And then after the electoral period, because most people think that the electoral period only is the period when you're voting for people. But more than the voting for the people, that you have the post-election period. And that's why that human rights report was very, very important, for us to have systematic engagement on what happens after an election period. Yes.
Now allow me go for a break. I'll be returning with my guest shortly.
UBC studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
It's our mission to secure your money.
Protecting your money is as important as earning it. It is for this reason that the Deposit Protection Fund of Uganda, DPF, was established by the government of Uganda to provide deposit protection to customers of regulated financial institutions. In the unlikely event that your commercial bank, credit institution or microfinance deposit-taking institution fails, the DPF will pay you up to 10 million Uganda shillings. Keep your personal information such as national identification number, mobile phone or an alternative bank account updated with your banker. Terms and conditions apply. For more information, contact DPF at Aha Towers, Plot 7 Lodell Road, Kampala. Call 0312-206-400 or visit our website at www.dpf.or.ug.
Are you looking for a home away from home? Then this is the place for you. My name is Chini Kaji and welcome to Hotel Le Confidential.
With 84 comfortable rooms where you can relax and feel safe. Each room has a lovely view of green vegetation, Wi-Fi, air conditioning, and a tasty breakfast.
Children can have fun at our kids' water park and our kids' play area. You can also enjoy our world-class health club, spa, sauna, gym, boutique, and sky blue swimming pool.
Thank you for choosing Hotel Le Confidential, where every stay is unforgettable. Come and stay in comfort, right at home, today, tomorrow, and always.
Exercise can't be sustained. Eating can't be stopped. It's even harder to lose weight. Come and give it a try. Genshikang L-carnitine chromium capsules. Plant extract, scientific ratio. Take 3 capsules each time. The active ingredient accelerates fat burning. Eat twice a day. Don't take a detour. Weight loss starts now. Genshikang L-carnitine with chromium capsules helps you stay in shape. Please follow medical advice when taking this product.
In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of information, defenders of truth. With Maskari Heritage Advantage, they uphold every citizen's right to reliable and free information. Their archived stories shaped our past and illuminate our present. Yet now, as new challenges arise and the world evolves, their mission faces its greatest test yet. Be part of our journey and let's navigate the unknown, uncover the untold, and safeguard our future together. Tune into your public broadcaster, for it is the intersection of trust and truth. Because to UBC, your story, and every voice matters. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Live from UBC studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Welcome back from that break. You're still watching UBC TV. It is The Extra. I'm Robert Chirabo Nyonyi Ntono. And with me, I have Council Simon Senyonga, who is the Director, International Center for Religious Advocacy and Development. We are looking at the 28th annual report of the state of human rights and freedoms in Uganda 2025. Now, what is the state of human rights? We've just been hinting on some of the highlights of this report, but of course there were major concerns raised by stakeholders, of which Council Senyonga is among the stakeholders, given his organization. Now, Council, what were those outstanding concerns that you did raise?
I think the main one that we raised was the report coverage, the extensive report coverage on all the fundamental human rights. So let me just create a background to that. The Constitution of Uganda has a whole chapter concerning human rights and freedoms and responsibilities, and that is chapter 20, chapter 4 of the Constitution, specifically from Article 20, which is on the protection and promotion of human rights, to Article 45, which is on the international human rights and obligations. So the main concern that we raised was, number one, why is this specific report not giving extensive attention to the freedom of worship? Because as I earlier on mentioned, according to the UBO statistics, 87% of the Ugandans subscribe to a faith or a religion. That makes them a significant demographic. Now, in that context, we realize that religious institutions, realize that different faith-based organizations are key players in the full realization of even the electoral democracy of Uganda. Number one, these are the majority voters. Number two, the point I raised, because I made a submission before the committee and the different stakeholders, and my case was that, why doesn't the Uganda Human Rights Commission, which has a mandate to make sure that it releases these periodic review reports, but also secondly, it has a duty of creating civic awareness about the fundamental human rights. So I raised the concern that religious institutions and faith-based organizations they have the convening power, what we call convening power, which is a very big asset in a democratic entity, in a democratic space like Uganda. So my question was, why wasn't the freedom of worship given key attention? Because this is the right under which you have majority of the Ugandans coming under to participate. So if the report does not give specific attention on how the freedom of worship was affected during the electoral period, then you're having a major gap within the conversation of the realization of the freedom of worship. And I think, fair enough, the Uganda Human Rights Commission gave their response that normally when they are doing their reports, they focus on thematic areas. And the nature of the human rights we have, it will be so broad a report if all rights were given full attention. So what they did is that they focused on a thematic area, and under that thematic area, then there is much more focal attention given to specific areas. That's why under the 13 chapters of the report, they focus on different areas that were affected by the electoral period. So my main concern was on the full reporting on the freedom of worship. Number two, I also had a concern around the comparative analysis. That when you look at the different nations, the different human rights commissions across the different nations which we are seemingly aspiring to, firstly from an East African region, then at a continental level of Africa, then at a global level, you will realize that most of the different commissions will pay attention to the full human rights perspectives. But in the Ugandan context, I think the approach is more focused on choice of a thematic area, then that is addressed. But then I felt that that was one of the major the major gaps that would affect the demographic representation of Uganda in the context of electoral democracy, but also number two, it would affect in terms of building of public trust. Because if the Uganda Human Rights Commission has a duty to ensure that it popularizes the realization of fundamental freedoms and human rights, then it has a duty to get in touch with key stakeholders to make sure that they have their buy-in, but also their understanding, to make sure that what they are reporting about, because as Dr. Daniel Ruhweza, who was the key critique of the report, mentioned, the human rights report shouldn't just be a mere administrative tool of a state body. It should also wield assertive power to the government to make sure that not only does it rattle feathers, but also proposes fundamental areas of change that can shape the growth of the human rights regime in Uganda. So the question becomes, if you miss out a major area like the freedom of worship, what does that speak to the essence of building public trust and in the essence of engaging those with convening power? If you're dealing with, for example, the different faith-based organizations, we have the capacity to bring together over 87% of the nationals. In the times where Uganda has needed leadership, in the times of crisis, it has been faith-based organizations and in essence the freedom of worship which has been a key arbiter even when other freedoms are threatened. So if key arbiters, those who have public trust, those who have convening power, which is the whole essence of democratic realization of human rights, are not fully given forefront attention, it causes issues of public trust. Now also the other area that is related to the realization of the freedom of worship in relation to the report is the engagement of the largest demographic in this nation. Right now, over 75% of the nationals are under 35 years. That makes us mainly a youth-led population. If we are mainly youth-led, most of these youth, are found in faith-based organizations. How are we engaging them? Because they have a degree of access, extent in operation, which may not be per se given full. It doesn't have. The Human Rights Commission doesn't have full access and reach or trust as would be the religious institutions. Because the Uganda Human Rights Commission has regional offices, it has field offices across the different districts in Uganda, but they may not have established grassroots operation like faith-based organizations.
How do faith-based organizations, apart from people coming and praying and going away, giving a tenth and all that, how do they, for example, I want to use the born again, where you subscribe to. The Anglicans, the Catholics, the Muslims usually have structures. These ones are wake up and I'm Apostle Bob. You know, I'm the Alpha and the Omega. So how does such help in? One, some may not even observe human rights. It is me, it is me. It was my vision, I'm the vision bearer. You know these things. Now, how do we assume that these can be more than an institution fully fledged with a mandate?
And I'll just give you an example in that context. Part of the duties of what you call the vision bearers, let's say in the Pentecostal movement, is to participate in service delivery, but also community transformation. You mentioned about my subscription. For example, I belong to a ministry called Zoe Fellowship, led by Prophet Elvis Mbonye. Part of the initiatives that Prophet Elvis Mbonye has done to transform the community, and I'll just give you about 3 examples. The initiation of the organization of spiritual leaders, men and women of God. So recently, last year, he launched what is called the Remnant Identity Coalition, with the mandate of mainly gathering and convening spiritual leaders. Number 2, having shared resources and knowledge. Number 3, advancing collaborative efforts in terms of evangelism. Number 4, collective advocacy and protection of the rights of spiritual leaders, but also increased visibility. Now that's what the Remnant Identity Coalition is doing. Part of the duties, part of the work that the Prophet has done through the Remnant Identity Coalition is to empower spiritual leaders to go back and transform their communities by having a knowledge base of what they're supposed to be doing, not as only spiritual leaders, but also fighting for their space within the national, regional, and even global perspective. Number two, he has also impacted the young people. So he has begun about almost 10 years now. He began an organization called the National Christian Students Association. That is a platform which brings together Christian students. Now all those young people are being empowered to have meaningful participation and transformation of their communities. So the Prophet empowers the young people to go back and change their communities. Part of the very exciting programs they have is what is called the circle clubs, and these are school-based clubs which focus on building a holistic student who does not only impact their community, internal community, but also everybody involved in the educational life cycle and ecosystem. Now that is a person who is having transformative ideas. Now also Prophet Elvis initiated what is called, he's the patron and founder of the International Center for Religious Advocacy and Development. Having gone through the days of COVID-19 and we saw how much the freedom of worship was affected, part of the cause that stirred him up was to ensure that the freedom of worship is given full realization at a global level. So the prophecies he gives don't only stop at prophecies, but also they are translated into meaningful society transformation perspectives through those three vehicles that I've given you. So you realize that also part of the initiatives that we did in the last year was actually to have a charity drive, a charity run. We impacted over 2,000 families in the entire Machinde division, Machinde Sabagabo constituency. So you find that lives are being meaningfully transformed, but also you find that the Prophet is now a key driver of collaborative efforts, even with government. So if you're supporting community transformative initiatives of the key demographic, which is the young people, through the National Christian Students Association, you're transforming men and women of God through the Remnant Identity Coalition, but also you're building an intellectual powerhouse that meaningfully contributes to the transformative conversations in this country concerning the International Center for Religious, through the International Center for Religious Advocacy and Development. Then you are actually, as you rightly said, my brother Chirabo, that you are empowering, you are enforcing, you are now making the people realize that the freedom of worship, which gives you convening power, does not only stop at that. But now you're having people like Prophet Elvis Mbonyi who are leading the way, who are leading the conversation in the transformative conversations of this nation. So these are going to be the key players in the human capital development of Uganda. These are going to be the key players in the economic transformation of Uganda. But even most importantly, these are the key players. And I'll give you just one final example. When we're discussing the whole conversation of international legal obligations, part of the key drivers of the economy, you are aware, is tourism. And part of the areas I believe this nation should have a conversation on is even religious tourism. If you're going to have a person, let's say like Prophet Elvis Mbonyi, who does a very big crusade in Pakistan, in the center of a Muslim capital, Karachi, gathering over 50,000 Muslims, you're having what I would call a very big religious export, but also a person who is shaping the image of our nation for the good, because then he becomes an ambassador of peace in a nation which has been torn apart. And no wonder after his visit in Pakistan, you've begun seeing, I know that Pakistan is one of the biggest relationship partners in Uganda, whether it's from the different agricultural export engagements or foreign direct investments. You realize that if you have a key player like the Prophet within the nation of Pakistan, that means there's going to be enhanced peace, there's going to be enhanced transformation in that country. So now we are beginning to see a generation of religious leaders who are not only stopping at the pulpit, but they are going into the marketplace to meaningfully translate and transform the global narrative around what the freedom of worship in essence is. And that is why I was aggressively lobbying for the specific protection for the specific conversation on the freedom of worship in the human rights report. So for me, that is something which is very core in terms of our conversation in transforming the nation, and how the church, the Christians, are beginning to take their places to have some of these conversations.
Okay, well, very interesting there. Not only looking at preaching the word of God, but also how do we better shape the context of religious rights for many Ugandans. Now I must come to the end of this, and I'll just give my guest a minute to have his parting shot.
I want to, first of all, to begin by thanking our government, the government of Uganda, for the opportunity to have such a platform to have transformative conversations. As our president has rightly said, that this is Chisanja Hakuna Sleep. This is a Chisanja where we are going to see the meaningful growth of our nation. And part of that conversation, I believe, is going to be catered for when we begin seeing the rights which have been previously at the background, misunderstood, misinterpreted, now beginning to be reshaped and redefined. And that is why we are using some of these platforms to have these meaningful conversations. So I believe that more than ever, the biggest demographic of the young people, but also the religious institutions, are going to begin coming out to be major contributors and key players, but also to commend the Uganda Human Rights Commission and other state agencies which have been key participants in the efforts to realize the fundamental human rights. We are not yet at 100%, but I believe we are not where we were before. So I also want to conclude by congratulating the President of Uganda, the members of parliament upon their swearing in, and in the coming days seeing that the full constitution of the government is going to be of a fundamental change and in an era of the realization of the freedom of worship. So for myself and my colleagues at the International Center for Religious Advocacy and Development, the Remnant Identity Coalition, and the National Christian Students Association, we want to thank you for hosting us and having this conversation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Council Senyonga, and above all, our viewer, thank you for being with us all the way from 6:30 till now. We really appreciate you. I can't wait to be part of your bedroom, part of your sitting room, part of your office, part of wherever you will be, watching me, as tomorrow is Friday. There is so much that we have for you. Remember, Friday is Friday special. We usually have some artists, we have some light discussions. We hope you'll be part of us as we usher you into the weekend. May God bless you. See you tomorrow.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
My question is, what is the difference between rental tax